Welcome to Making Democracy Work. This is a monthly series brought to you by the League of Women Voters. Every month, we discuss topics of community interest. And this month, we're going to talk about using local woods and thus, it's part of the using local food, local products, and lessening our import footprint. So today we're going to talk about making caskets from local wood. And we have with us our co-host, Kaui and the head of Pāhiki Eco-Caskets, Courtney Gussick, and
Logan Baggett.
Here I go.
Logan Baggett. Let me just throw that one in there.
Thank you. And so I understand, Courtney, it was your idea. So tell me how you got the idea.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for having us today first.
Thank you.
About 8 years ago, when my dad passed away, my family had come to kind of the same threshold that all families come to eventually in the space, deciding how we wanted to carry out his funeral, what the sort of end-of-life landscape looked like for him. And our family had, as most families do, I'm guessing probably this will sound very familiar to all of us, we had practiced a lot of really eco-conscious behaviors, or at least tried to in our home, and we recycled and composted and grew a lot of our own food and shared and upcycled, downcycled, backward cycled all of our clothing through all the sisters. So when we got to this place of considering what the actual kind of final tangible product in space would look like with my dad, we wanted something that was consistent with that kind of family culture that we had. And traditional caskets are typically made from steel and metal and plastic, lacquer. They're hermetically sealed with rubber. Oftentimes, caskets that are considered hardwood are actually just pressboard with a veneer, and the pressboard, of course, is laden with formaldehyde and a lot of chemicals to keep it preserved. For our family, it didn't make sense in that space. It seemed very inconsistent and incongruent with our sort of beliefs and practices to then, in my dad's name, in the end, bury him in something made of those materials. It's kind of a interesting way how we can sort of compartmentalize things, because if you took all of those materials in a different context and you were to take a gallon of lacquer and paint and 12 pounds of metal, a bottle of formaldehyde, and you went to the Aloha and tried to dump it in the middle of the day, you'd get fined for illegal toxic dumping. And then we get to this space in the death space because we don't have these conversations where we're actually paying someone to do that very thing on our behalf. So I thought there must be a better way. I started kind of Googling around, how many people pass every year in the US? What is the cremation rate versus burial? Just thinking about the exponential effect of this single, very heavy decision my family had to make. Well, what does it look like when you're doing that 1.3 million times per year? What is the cumulative effect of all of these toxins and chemicals? And so I sort of bookmarked in my mind at that time, when I have enough resources in the future, I want to start just creating very simple, plain, biodegradable caskets made of wood, just like the one we eventually found for my dad, for other families, so that when you actually get to this space, families can feel like there's some continuity in the way they live their lives and the way they die. And when you're leaving this final kind of eco imprint and legacy for your children and your grandchildren and all the forthcoming generations, you're not then leaving some chemicals behind that will be leaching into the water tables, into our earth.
That's so beautiful. So the name, Pāhiki, tell us about that.
So it means to pass quietly, go lightly, and touch gently. So it's kind of my completely all-inclusive word when I was sort of searching for something that didn't just describe an action or something that's episodic, but something that really means all of these things and sort of tries to capture the spirit of what I'm hoping Pāhiki will be and continue to be. The external perimeter of the caskets, we also fasten small biodegradable linen loops around the outside so that families can populate them with foliage and fresh flowers and greenery at the funeral. And in sort of our ideal mind's eye, it would be used as if we were having a funeral now and the casket was here and the loops were bare, every person who attends your funeral and goes up in the sort of family procession line to, pay their respects, each puts a flower, a piece of foliage in it. So by the end of the funeral, it's completely populated with sort of this beautiful reflection of at least the people who are in attendance in your life and at your funeral. And so that, the kind of light touch part of Pāhiki also sort of tries to capture that experience where we wanted to figure out a way to re-engage touch in the death space in a way that wasn't traumatic or confronting for people. So we thought, that's something that's beautiful and simple. You're not asking someone to place their hands on the person or, say something they don't believe in, or just putting the
Ritual.
a ritual.
Yeah. We miss that a lot in modern life. And I think you're doing a fabulous job of addressing that emotional concern as well as the environmental concerns. You're so integrated. Wow.
Thank you.
It's just amazing that you come to this from a very different world. I just want to mention what your prior day job was before you were a casket mistress.
I was a test engineer for a startup in San Francisco called User Testing. So I was working my 40 hours a week remotely from home, working there, and then managing a team of engineers. And then just about 5 or 6 weeks ago now, devoted myself full-time to Pāhiki. And Logan's been full-time all the while. He's really been the incredible champion for this past almost year and a half now.
So what was the you are in Waimanalo and sharing a space. Tell us about that arrangement and how that Waimanalo community is working.
Well, the people that run Waimanalo Wood, they're wonderful human beings, and they have allowed us to come in and we work out of the corner of their wood mill, and we've built countertops and tables, and we share some of the table saws and different pieces of equipment that they actually had when we got in there, but we're able to work together in the same space, and we have our own area that's dedicated to just building caskets.
So that in itself is very eco-conscious.
Absolutely, yeah.
Not everybody needs to buy all of those machines.
Oh my gosh,
Oh, yeah.
Not everybody can buy all those machines.
Yeah.
So you're really making it work on so many levels. I can imagine that in this line of fabricating caskets that only really come into play at this incredibly vulnerable time, that your interactions with people aren't the same as if you were selling widgets, say. What has your experience been around that?
That's funny you asked. So we've had a few families actually come in ahead of time who wanted to touch and see and sort of interact with the casket, which is very understandable. It's this very intimate, tangible thing that your family will interact with that you otherwise don't really get to see or touch. So we've had a few people, a handful, come through the shop in general. There was this kind of emotional miscalculation, I think, that I did at the outset, which was sort of thinking through the logistics of, okay, the principles. Where do we source our materials from? What does our supply chain look like? Who's in our hui? Who has, kind of things you can map out nicely on a piece of paper. Who will I build with? What are some of the core principles that we have? What does the day-to-day look like? Thinking, oh, okay, check. We figured this out. We'll deliver it to the funeral homes. We'll have, this experience. The piece of the math that I completely missed was thinking about what that interaction looks like when we show up to deliver at the funeral home and the family is also there and wants to interact or thank us or meet us. I didn't factor in how it's incredibly beautiful and it's such a special experience, but how heavy that can be. And there's times where I have just sobbed my way home in the car in traffic. But it's a beautiful, wonderful experience to be able to, know and understand exactly what kind of love and sort of mana and effort was put into this thing, and to be able to transfer that with our own hands that we made it with to these families is really, I can't liken it to any other experience in my life.
I think it would be a good time to show one of the caskets. And yes, so it'll come on soon. And so sometimes before, when they know that their loved one is going to die and they're making preparations while he is still living, they come to see you to look at the casket. I see. And there's one with a little ritual that you have described, which is possible during the services.
And this one looks like you can it's open for viewing. And
give
are they
people
all
the
like that?
option.
Oh, here's another one.
Yeah.
And let's mention that this is Albizia.
This is Albizia.
Our last show was with Joey Valenti of the Albizia Project, and they're good friends, and it's lovely to see this use of it as well. What do you line it with?
We just use unbleached cotton muslin. So that was our kind of closest approximation alternative to caskets are typically lined with synthetic polyester, several yards of it at that. So we were thinking, okay, so if we take away the sort of, strip away the kind of ornate, extraneous function of the polyester, what is the function of the lining? And that is just something that's clean and looks soft and, like it will cradle the person. And so we just sort of searched around and found that if cotton muslin is unbleached, it's completely biodegradable and it doesn't have any chemicals in it. So,
Yes. And then you made a provision for the mourners to put flowers there.
Yes. Yeah.
So there's a as part of the service, people can add flowers, and then in the end, the casket just looks really beautiful. And each one has a touch of the people who are there.
Yeah.
Yes.
yeah.
So let's go to the actual making of it. Logan, we have some pictures of you hard at work, actually, both of you. Let's see what that is like.
Absolutely.
Going from Courtney's gone from being a software engineer to hardwoods, and you came to caskets through.
I was doing solar work before I came to Pāhiki, and so I had some hands-on construction experience just with solar arrays and whatnot, and jumped over to wood, which is a little different, but wonderful and still good for the world.
What do you like about it?
I like creating something that is coming from the earth. You see it as a tree, and then the end product is, whatever you can imagine. So in our case, it's caskets, but it looks very different, rough versus polished and sanded down. So,
Yeah, that sort of transformation. And also just the full circle nature of it is amazing, because we only source our wood from Waimanalo wood. And this is a question, it's both a question we get asked the most and the probably greatest point of confusion is the wood, where it comes from. Are we contributing to deforestation? Is it poached wood? Are these harvesters? Completely fair questions. Again, because we don't have these conversations about the death space, completely understandable. It's not something, I can't speak for Logan, but it's not something we take personally when people don't understand it.
Yeah.
We just realize we have a lot of work to do in terms of
educating.
Yeah, educating and having conversations. But we source our wood exclusively from Waimanalo wood. So when arborists are paid, whether it's by the state for the rail project or widening the highways, or homeowners when they have a tree that sort of is encroaching on their plumbing system with the roots, or in risk of falling over onto a home or a school nearby, they'll have the tree removed. So there's kind of this unknown space between having a tree removed in society and it sort of just automatically disappearing. So what automatically happens for arborists who are conscientious is they will drop them at places like Waimanalo Wood to then be reclaimed, because the alternative is they'll drop the wood and have to either pay a dump fee or send it through the chipper and spread it across the forest floor, which it will then, of course, biodegrade. So it's really diverting something that is otherwise a completely scrap waste product into something that's purposeful and beautiful. And so we get asked often, oh, isn't, koa endangered? Isn't that monkey pod tree took 150 years to grow? And yes, you're correct about all of those things, but it's just that kind of missing piece of information in society of there are many use cases that are necessary for trees to be removed. So instead of just rendering them useless, we're trying to transform them into something that's purposeful and beautiful. And then it takes it from a tree that was born and raised in the Aina here and, in the environment, in the ecosystem here, and then it is eventually returned to that, very same land and space. And even just knowing, if we have the time and space to cross paths with the arborists when they're dropping the trees, knowing exactly where a tree came from is really special too. I mean, it's nerdy. We think it's really interesting though to be making something and think, oh, this was taken down from such and such street. Yes. And we come across geeks every now and then who think that's interesting too. Because we don't, we live in such a disposable time. We don't know where our things come from or where they're grown or who's touching them or kind of what's going into it when it's being made.
I think we need to know more about Waimanalo Wood.
Yes.
That is the source of all of your wood.
Yes.
And the source of all of Waimanalo's wood is the arborists who have been cutting down trees are being paid to cut down trees. And I never knew that.
Yeah.
And so
We didn't
they
either.
also make countertops. What else do they make?
Oh, there's coffee tables. I mean, you can do
Yeah.
anything. The wood is so beautiful. Like it's really up to the eye of the beholder, the craftsmen, people who are putting it together. But yeah.
And you say there are other businesses like that arborists will drop their trees off to?
There are a few other small sawmills on
Yeah.
Oahu. Having the milling equipment is it's a very expensive
Huge
operation to
investment.
run. Waimanalo Wood has been the only place that our business has operated outside of, or within rather, and the only place that we source our wood from. And that's been a really nice, not just steady flow of a lot of different types of very beautiful, useful wood, again, that otherwise would just become waste, but also just the principles and the concepts of the people who own and operate Waimanalo Wood are extremely like-minded with Pāhiki, like-minded with us as individuals, and are really providing an incredibly valuable service to society and helping to, again, offer this viable lumber or slabs to make beautiful tables with, and just help people understand that we don't need to be so import dependent in this way. There are some things that we'll probably never to scale be able to manufacture here properly. That's fine. It's just a blend and a balance of what are some of the resources that are hidden in plain sight, and Waimanalo Wood has helped really open my eyes and educate me, and I'm sure Logan would say the same about how to utilize a resource that is extremely carbon footprint heavy to import in just by the weight alone, and something that we don't need to reach further than Waimanalo to actually access.
There's another aspect to this. It's a time of stress when a death occurs. You're dealing with a mortuary, and they show you this array, and you can tell them you want it from your company.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. So one of the most exciting things, again, this is, I say exciting in quote marks because it's very nerdy specific, but one of the most, I guess exciting is a fair word to use, aspects of what we're doing is that just like as we're consumers with anything else, appliances, electronics, with homes, the Federal Trade Commission oversees home ownership and consumer ownership of certain products and services, and then within that will sort of, design rights and responsibilities. So one of the most incredible things that the Federal Trade Commission actually established was the funeral rule. Have you heard of it?
I have. But
Okay.
I have
Well,
my
you cheat. You cheat because you went to the service. Have you heard of the funeral rule?
No, tell us about it.
Logan hadn't either, and neither had I until I entered the space. So the funeral rule states, among other things, that you have the right to bring a casket from any source you wish, no matter which funeral home you go to, no matter where you're buried or cremated. It can even be a cardboard box, any receptacle. And of course, the funeral homes probably aren't too keen on telling you that when you walk in. But that's something that we're really working diligently on, helping educate people. We don't have to have any sort of special licensing for what we do. You don't need a special license as a consumer to purchase from us. We just deliver directly to the funeral homes, and it's this incredible, powerful right that we all have that very few people know about, and therefore they don't know how to exercise it. And it's interesting because especially in Hawaii, since we have a lot of very hot button, very tense issues and things that are sort of imposing on our state or on our resources, that will have a lot of kind of visibility around either protesting or, whatever the case may be. And I look at those really conspicuous things, and it's not an either or, it's definitely an and situation. I look at that and I think, it's not just these external sources imposing on our resources. We're actually accidentally doing the same thing when we're not aware of our right to not have to be embalmed, to bring an eco-friendly casket, to the funeral rule is very comprehensive and extensive. And so just helping people understand, you have complete sovereignty and agency with what happens in the death space, and just helping people understand that so they can exercise it clearly.
We here in Hawaii have a very high rate of cremation. I probably read it on your website that it's 80%, or maybe somewhere else.
70.
70?
Yeah, 70%.
Okay. But
Between
it's pretty
70
high.
and 80.
And I think that is in part because there isn't an environmentally and Aina friendly and a really Aloha Aina way to be buried besides scattering ashes. And so this is an amazing that it's taken so long for something to come up, but I'm so glad that you saw that the dots needed connecting and have put that together.
Thank you.
What are your deep hopes as far as your bringing this out? I mean, you're obviously very savvy. I found you through Instagram. It's Pāhiki Caskets, right? Great Instagram.
Thank you.
You do a really good job of telling your story just in pictures. But where do you hope? What do you want to see happen here?
You want to talk about the cemetery?
Yeah. No, I mean, eventually, if Pāhiki could also own a cemetery someday, a green cemetery, then we could provide these green caskets to this body of land, and that would be a dream.
Yeah, we're definitely looking to secure a parcel of land for the green cemetery. And then in that green cemetery space, sort of the parameters are no embalming fluid is allowed. You can only have a biodegradable casket or shroud. You can just simply be shrouded in Hawaii as well.
Biobags, as they call them.
Biobags, you can have a biobag. And then the markers for the places, instead of traditional headstones, are native plants or rocks. And then in green cemeteries, you are sharing your physical space in a much more intimate way than a traditional cemetery. So they actually do stack burial, so that as the bodies decompose, you can keep reusing and regenerating the land, so it isn't indefinitely blocking off a single piece of 6x4 land for a body.
Wow, that's very interesting. Is there somewhere where that's being done?
Yes. There are green cemeteries. There are a few in the more kind of northern part of the Bay Area. There are a couple in Oregon, Vermont, kind of the usual suspects that you would guess would be piloting these sort of green cemeteries. Connecticut has a really beautiful one. I just know these cemeteries I follow on Instagram. And there are a few really kind of sort of well-maintained but proven green cemetery spaces to sort of look to for ideas and concepts of how to actually grow this out here. But it's interesting because there's no rocket science involved in it. It's just returning to the way we did things before we complicated things. So it is in every single way just it's kind of a return to the original way with an eye to the future. So it's neither negating progress and growth in the future nor negating our progress and sort of innovation of the past. And once we sort of have this green cemetery space, we also are hoping to have it be a permaculture space for native plants, for medicinal plants, and for flowers. Also just to kind of show, not that we're using the space to prove anything, but to show that green burial begets life. Because right now the system that we're in is death begets death. So when we're putting all these toxins and chemicals into the earth, it's just polluting our water tables and our soil and the earth here in our land. But if people are kind of buried and returned to the earth in the natural way, I mean, just to put it in a crass, simple way, you are fertilizer for the land, and we're walking pieces of the Aina in our human form now. So,
I have a burning question about the reuse of this space, which I think is brilliant. I was shocked that in Germany, when you get your burial plot, it's only for 50 years, and then you.
Oh, I didn't know that either.
So then, what would one do with the rock? Well, I guess with how do you envision that happening with the layers, or have you thought? Have you designed? How are you going to do that?
We have to look at the clock, and we're out of time.
Okay, well,
There's your
answer it on
cliffhanger.
Instagram.
And so I want to thank you very much, and you will have to put on your website what we're going to do about that green cemetery.
I will, I
All right.
promise.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
From the Pāhiki Eco-Casket Company.
Perfect.
Stay your names.
Logan Baguette.
Courtney Gussick.
And thank you, my co-host, Kaui Lucas. And thank you for watching.